Why are so many young people turning to gangs?
There's many different contributing factors that contribute to why young people. And I will say some of the factors is what your lady academic, sorry, I've forgotten her name, had mentioned earlier, which is social inequality, deprivation, school exclusions, because school exclusion is actually the beginning of how young people are trapped in the lifestyle of street gangs. But also, there is evidence to say that at the moment, if you look at the prison system, 76% of inmates, this is a stats that's come from the MOJ, the Ministry of Justice, where they've actually worked out that 76% of inmates, male inmates, have no fathers or have no relationship with fathers. Now, I'm not suggesting that every mother out there who's raising a child on her own, her child is going to end up being some sort of gang member. That's not what I'm going to say here, and people don't misquote what I'm saying. But we do have to take into account the role of fathers or the lack of fathers. We also have to take into account social inequality. The point that your lady guest has said earlier, what she was talking about, the reporting of crime, is an absolute fact. That in certain areas, especially deprived areas, the police will not come out and they are treated differently to middle class. And we have to acknowledge that, especially in poor white communities and black communities, they won't come out. But if you're in a nice neighborhood like Mayfair, Knightsbridge, Kensington, some of those nice areas in Manchester as well, Cheshire, all those areas, they will come out. So the question is what kind of biased police force do we really have? Now, we hear a lot of talk about consent and arguments about whether police are not social workers. Now, one of the fundamental reasons we're in this problem isn't because of the police. I want people to understand it's because of societal issues. Societal issues is because we're not addressing the vision for children. What happens to a child who gets excluded from school? Nothing's put in place. That child is now hanging out on the estate. A gang member aged 20, 21 then offers that child £75, £100, £150 a day to sell drugs. He or she may not refuse that money, especially if they come from a background, if the mum's not working or the mum's got issues of her own. So we have to take into account there are many reasons why young people end up in this lifestyle. It isn't just as simple as saying absent fathers. It's not just as simple as saying school exclusions. It's all of those that we have to take into account, which means it's not a police problem, but a societal problem.
Yeah, Sheldon, I'm going to be a bit blunt here because I've listened with interest to everything you say and I find it fascinating and I agree with much of it. But I do find it fascinating that the key thing that you miss out of all of that is choice, personal choice. Lots of people, Sheldon, get excluded from school and don't go around terrorising people. Lots of people don't have fathers and don't go around stabbing people. Personal choice is a key factor in lots of this.
No one's disputing that. What we're talking about here, there is a section of society that doesn't have the same mentality as others. Of course, you've got lots of kids being excluded and they've never committed a crime. And of course, we've got lots of children growing up in houses where there are no fathers. No one's suggesting that. What we're talking about here is a small minority of our society that do fall into it. How do we look at that? How do we address that? It's easy for you to say choice because you might have had a better choice. But if you've got a young person who lives on an estate where 70% of the people on that estate are unemployed, 70% don't have any father figures. They look out the window and they see a guy who's dressed in the most expensive clothes, making a YouTube video about this gangster lifestyle, then that choice becomes limited because everyone on that estate is involved in the gang. So if that child doesn't join the gang and he lives on that estate, he's putting himself or herself at risk. So it's not as simple as that. We all like to sit down and say it's a choice. Sometimes young people don't have a choice and we have to put ourselves in their position. We can speak from our high ground. We all live in middle class. I live in a middle class area now. I didn't before. Other young people do not live and do not have the same fortunate situation as I did to be able to move out of the inner cities. So rather than us say you have a choice, which is a simple answer to absolutely everything, does not necessarily apply to every single child. We need to understand you've got to put yourself in their shoes, where what it's like. What would you be like living in an estate where 70% of everyone is unemployed and mostly everyone is involved in the gang? You could not say no, and I can assure you, you've never been in that position.
Excuse me, I do want to come on here, because when you say you could assure me that I have this higher ground and I don't really know what I'm talking about, which is what I'm taking from you. As a teenager, actually, I was on an estate. My partner was in and out of prison. My dad was very abusive to me. My sister ended up dead 3 days before she was 20. So actually, I know a lot of what I speak, and I know a lot of what goes on is the choice. My peer group were wrong-uns, to put it mildly. I spent my weekends in and out of prison visiting my partner. And do you know what I did? I looked around and I made a choice. I had nothing, no proper support system, certainly no education, definitely not any money, definitely not any privilege. But I looked and I wanted better for myself. I didn't know how, but I just had a fire inside me that it was going to be different. And I was the odd one out. I did go against the people, my peer group. I did go against the people on the estate. So I don't dispute much of what you say, and I've got a lot of respect for you, Sheldon, because I know you've turned your life around and I know you've made a difference to a lot of people. It just really annoys me that we talk in depth for all of these different factors, but we never talk about the choice. When these kids pick up these guns, they pick up these knives, they know what they're doing. I assume that they're not stupid people in the main. They know what they're doing is wrong. And to me, I just get so frustrated at the absolute absence of any focus on personal responsibility.
I'm not disagreeing with your point, and your point, what you've made about yourself as well, proves my point that you went against the grain and you was the minority to turn around and say, you know what, I don't want this life. That proves my point that not everyone's going to have that mental capacity to make that decision as simple as that. For instance, I'll give you an example. I became a gang member because of the racial abuse that I faced, or we faced as black men living in a system that we called apartheid in London. Now, did my brothers become gang members? No. Did my brothers go to jail or stab anyone, shoot? No. So that proves my point that not everyone has that mental capacity to make a good decision and a choice to say, I'm not going to go down this path. My brothers did not go down this path. In fact, my brothers all became successful. Yes, some of them, my other brother had mental problems, but he didn't go down the path of being a gang member. So I fully understand. When I speak about choices, it's not that I'm attacking people who've made good choices. I'm trying to show us that everyone's got that strength, that mental capacity to say, you know what, I'm going to not be like my brothers did not want to be like me. They chose not to be like me. So I understand that. But what I'm trying to show everyone is that people need to understand, before we criticize young men and young women who fall into this trap, we have to understand not everyone has that mental strength to make those changes in their lives. And what we have to start doing is addressing societal issues rather than thinking, let's attack the police. Because my thing is, yes, the police have got a long way to go. I totally disagree with the gentleman, Mr. Starkey, in what he's saying, because obviously he doesn't really understand about how the police negative behaviour can affect certain communities, because if he did, he wouldn't speak like the way he's speaking. What I'm saying is quite clear. If you want to change society, we can't just look at the police in isolation, which is what I agree with the lady. What's her name? What is her name?
Lisa and David.
Lisa and David. So Lisa's point, sorry, Lisa, I do apologise for not being able to remember your name. I apologise. But Lisa, the point that Lisa's made is valid. You know, we've got to look at everything as a societal problem, because us saying, let's look at the police, they're weak, they're not doing their job. The police we've got to retrain the police in today's times, which is social media and the way things are being glamorized on social media with young men promoting this gangster lifestyle. We've got to retrain the police. But at the same time, we must address societal issues, social inequality, racism, structural racism, gender prejudice against women. We've got to look at rape cases. Why are so many women, when they go into courts, they're made to feel as if they're the perpetrators and not the victim? So all of this has to be addressed, but you can't address it.
Press pause, though, Sheldon. Press pause, because when you were talking about institutional racism, to my right, David Starkey let out a big sigh. David Starkey, why?
I let out a big sigh because Sheldon is fascinating. We are here to talk about the police. What Sheldon is doing is wanting an absolutely standard mid-lefty reconstruction of society. We haven't got time for it. I'm sorry. There's also no consent for it.
David, you know we haven't got
just
time.
one second.
Hang on, let him finish.
There is no need for it. Can we get back to what we were supposed to be talking about?